Yeah, and I think when you look at the different engagement models or modes of getting work done, whether it's hiring a permanent employee, engaging with contractors or temps, or getting work, outsourcing work to be delivered under a statement of work. These things, to understand how most effectively to use all available resource models, the business really needs to nail what it actually needs to get done. And I feel that's something that things like the pandemic are probably going to be a positive driver towards that, because it creates this urgency of what are we doing, where are we going, how much are we spending, what are we getting for that money, and people, there's no coasting. No coasting can really be justified. But it does also raise the question of where the resource center is controlled, or who controls that, which function, because obviously you're going across HR, operations, procurement. Where do you see that kind of balance of, not really power, but balance of responsibility? Does it ultimately sit with the CFO? How do you see that being distributed within organizations?
Yeah, again, a great question, Johnny. I think I'm probably still fairly ambivalent about where it physically sits in terms of, does it report up into which stovepipe? I guess there's a few things that we should probably chat about in terms of the things that are important for whatever this resource centre, as you call it, whatever the resource centre has. There's some attributes that it should have. I think through my experience, in the latter days of my RBS experience, the equivalent of a resource centre would have been the way that we had an overview of headcount, top down. And that was really a co-production between the COO of the investment bank and myself as the chief people officer. And that was, it was once a week for 3-4 hours, literally looking at all of the ins, all of the outs, all of the requirements. And clearly post global financial crisis, a lot of the banks were having to do a hell of a lot of remediation work, much of which was technology driven as well. And that really created a drain on resource requirements and resource needs. And, it was very hard to balance that with kind of keeping the show on the road, as well as we were at the time, contracting the organization and exit some product lines. So having a single view of that was really important. And that's probably the closest in my RBS life I got to a single view of strategic resources, albeit it was in an operational context at that point. I think when we'd acquired Getronics, we had some very hard financial targets to achieve, very clear sponsorship from the CEO, and we put in place a resource model, which is like a resource center. I chaired that, the COO was there, the CFO was there, the CEO occasionally participated, and the presenting different business divisions and heads would come along with their business requirements. And this was a business that was in about 16, 17 countries, so it was also relatively global. And we used to do it again, 3 hours a week, every Wednesday, and we literally went through line by line every resource request, and that was either permanent resources, and it would, in that business at that time, permanent resources would also include quite a lot of project work. So we had quite a good project perspective. And then obviously some of that project work had to be outsourced to consultants, contractors. And I remember at one stage we got to something like 18 definitions of resource that were all factored into that model. I chaired it. We also looked at gross margin of every project that the organization did to prioritize where we would put resource. And we did that. Really painful for some people around that process, but we hit the financial targets that we needed to hit, and actually was a good model in the context of what it was. It was a good model of trying to get the resource center into concept into place. And then I guess in my HSBC experience, it was much more of a business-led HR support, COO support. The group COO was very kind of strong in challenging, but it was more of a traditional model with the CFO just looking at headcount, the COO looking at the kind of the total picture, but not really in that kind of proactive strategic resource management. And as I left HSBC, it was still an exam question they were still trying to solve for, in truth.